Hey everybody, today I want to go over the front power seat mechanisms, the motor, the gearbox, the slides, the cables, all of that. So we're going to do it one step at a time. So to begin with, I've removed this from the seat. I was unable to get, there's an angle bracket that bolts the gearbox and motor together, and then that gets bolted to the seat. I was unable to remove my bracket from the seat because it's two Phillips head screws and they were just completely rusted shut. So instead of removing those, I removed the bolts that hold the motor and the gearbox. If you are able to get that angle bracket off, I would suggest doing it because it helps hold these in the right geometry. See, there's two screws on the side of the gearbox and then there's screws on the side of the motor, and it holds them in the right geometry so that you can test them as a unit. I can still test them as a unit, but I kind of have to hold things together. You'll see in a little bit. So first things first, I wanted to test the motor. So I pulled the gearbox off of the motor and I have a ground clamped to it. I've got a little small 12-volt battery, and then I have the positive side disconnected for now. The orange wire that's going up to the relay is the only positive line. The ground is typically through the frame of the seat, so you need to make sure that you have a ground clamped on here or something, otherwise it's not going to work. So plug in the positive, and then I have my seat switch here, and we'll go ahead and actuate the switch, and you can hear everything clicking and working, and it works in all of my positions. So we'll go through the switch here in a second. So my motor is good, and I would expect that a lot of people's motors are good. If mine survived being in the car that it was in, I would think that this is a very strong motor, very reliable. Anyways, so now we've tested our motor. The motor is good. Since mine's good, I haven't gone in here. I don't know, what the brushes look like. I don't know what the inside of this relay looks like. It works. I'm not going to touch it. If you have problems with yours, I would think that some of this could be almost serviceable. Getting some new brushes and cleaning it up. Maybe the bearings get sticky. I don't know. But that's beyond the realm of what my project needs because this works good. So let me pull all this stuff down and we will start looking at the switch. Okay, so here we are with the switch. I did take this apart and clean it, so I'm going to show you how that comes apart and what you'll need to do that. What I have is a very tiny flathead pry bar and a nice clean wire brush. So what you'll see is that there are clips all the way around this thing. There's 4 of them. And on the side, there's a little push tab. What you're going to want to do is push that as hard as you can until it pushes in and it clicks. Then you can take this flathead pry bar and pull the tab out just like that. So there's 4 of these all the way around. I know I'm only taking 3 out. That's because I lost one of them up underneath the stairs here and I haven't gone and gotten it yet. So that being said, be careful with these. They will spring out and just go everywhere on you. So once you get all those out, this just lifts out and that's it. So you have the moving switches in here. Mine are all moving nice and freely, so I didn't touch them. They don't look like they ever had lube on them. It's just a clearance fit with the plastic, and I think that's just fine. So I left mine alone. Now here's the contacts. So what I did to clean is this is similar to like a relay contact where you have a silver plate here and then a small contact down there for it to hit. And so all I did was scrape these off with the flathead screwdriver. as much as I could just to get any buildup of gunk. Mine was working pretty well before, so I'm not sure what a failed one would look like, but I'm just trying to refresh and make sure that it's not going to fail soon after I reinstall it. And then I would take the wire brush and kind of go in here a little bit and try to clean the little fork contact off. And so that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit right here is I'm not sure if you can see it very well, but you have the main piece that moves when you push the button, right? So that pushes down, but it actually hits two different contacts. So there's a small fork before it hits the stud. Now, the reason that there is because that actually powers the gearbox solenoid before it powers the motor. So the stud is the motor power, and the fork is the solenoid for the switch box. So depending on which way you're pushing this, it activates the solenoid, or it'll activate a solenoid, and then the further you push, it'll turn on the motor. So that way the solenoid engages the gear fully before the motor actually starts spinning. Keeps it from grinding those plastic gears. So that's how you rebuild that. Well, at least clean it. I don't know if that's necessarily a rebuild, but hey, it's a cleaning, and I think I'm pretty happy with the way mine works right now. Assembly is just the reversal of that. Put it together. When you're pushing these clips in, make sure that you push them nice and firm, and confirm that that little tiny tongue sticks all the way into the notch here. Otherwise, when you go to push the switch, it'll push this whole panel right back off. So now I want to go through the gearbox with you. Okay, so the gearbox. What I used was a toothbrush, I guess kind of like a pipe cleaner, Phillips head screwdriver. I use white lithium grease and some brake cleaner. So the cables are normally attached to here with a single screw, maybe two screws. Yeah, two screws to hold the cables in here. So you just take those screws out. Always take a picture before you take it apart. Take those screws out, the cables come off. Now we're left with just the gearbox. This plug is stubborn, so just keep on pulling on it. It's braced pretty well on the inside. On the sides, there are 3 Phillips screws. Just take those apart, take those out. All right, then the two halves will separate. You'll notice that this side with the 3 larger round sections, this is the side where the actual solenoids are. It's also got the electrical connection. So when I pulled mine apart, I kind of leaned that way because I didn't want those heavy solenoids to come out and, throw everything everywhere. So as it's coming out, you'll see, now yours may not come out like this. It probably won't if it's all gummed up. You'll probably have some of the shafts sticking in this side. But this is the way it comes out if it's nice and clean, okay? So now I want to just show you how this thing works. So this is the main motor drive. In here are all the gears. They sit in here just like this. I think I just put that one in upside down. All the gears sit in here. And so what you're going to see is that these gears, no matter what position you're trying to move the seat, These gears move all the time. So if there's any of these that have a little bit more resistance on them, it's going to show up no matter what position you're trying to move. So the way it engages each position is that it has this piece that moves on the shaft. Now that's also keyed to the shaft, so when this is engaged, it's engaging that shaft. Now you'll notice that there's a spring that normally holds it off. There is a plunger on the solenoid that when it engages, it pushes this down and engages to these top two wings on the plastic gear. Once that's engaged, this shaft will now turn with the gear. So we've got a lot of moving parts in here, right? The gears on the shaft within the casing itself, the slider on the shaft, and then we also, let me take all these out, we also have on the solenoid side, if we slowly dump this out and hold it, you will notice that there are the plungers that move on this side. Now notice, you see how it's pushed out right there? That's when it's engaging the gear. Normally it's going to be pushed up by the spring, and then it pushes down to engage the gear. So the first thing that we're going to want to clean are these guys. And what I did is I took some 600 grit sandpaper and polished off any of the rust that I had on here. You can see that some of these were quite rusty compared to others. Now I did not lubricate these because this shaft or this sleeve inside of this solenoid is what looks like maybe like a Delrin type plastic or something. It's a very slippery plastic. So I didn't want to risk gumming it up with a lubrication that I don't really need. So once you got those cleaned, you can put them all back in and slide it back into your, actually don't slide it back in your housing, but set it off to the side. Now, let's go ahead and clean this housing. You take some brake clean, spray all the old grease in there. You're gonna see a bunch of old white grease and it's gonna be gummed up in the corners. Mine was quite sticky and hard. And then you're also gonna take your pipe cleaner and you're gonna push it in and out of these holes to clean these out. Now, that's an important part to look at because when this shaft sits in here, there is no bearing. There is nothing but just that bushing sitting right there. And then all it is a little steel insert that this sits in. So if there's anything gummed up there, the motor is gonna feel it and it's gonna slow down. So make sure you get those nice and clean. So once you get all those cleaned, now this housing is clean, what I am going to do is spray just a little bit of white lithium onto those bushings and around them because I know this shaft has to sit on those and pivot, right? And slide that back in there and set it off to the side. That side is now done. Now you're going to want to do the same thing to this side. Take all the gears out, right? Clean all this up, pipe clean, take this out too, pipe clean there, and then we're going to want to spray some white lithium in there. I just like white lithium. For you know, plastic gears and stuff, you can use whatever lubricant you feel like would work well. So now, how does this thing go back together? Are these gears identical? Let's see. They look identical. They're both toothed the same, so we're going to put them in there like they're identical. So the two bigger ones are identical, and then this last small one rides off of the big gear there. All right, so those are all done. Well, now we're going to spray the snot out of these. Get them all kinds of goopy, because I don't want to have to do this again. Okay? All right, now we set that aside. Now go through with a rag and clean all these shafts. Mine on the ends were very, very, very goopy. That old grease had just dried almost to a glue. And that's the real reason why my seats weren't moving, other than that one track that's rusted. But go ahead and get those all cleaned up. Same thing with the slider, right? Take that pipe cleaner, go in and out of that hole, get it all cleaned up. Now, we'll put all the springs back in. And then put these back in. Now, I don't know if these are all identical. I think they are. They sure look it. Yeah, so all these shafts and sliders are all identical. Put it in there and it moves nice and easy, right? That's what we're looking for. Now, something to be careful of is these sliders have a small plastic spacer, I guess, on top of them. You want to make sure you don't lose that, because that's probably what's helping the solenoid engage with it. Oh, and also, I guess that makes sense, because that doesn't necessarily want to spin with the shaft once it's turned on. So that's kind of almost like a bushing. You know what? We're going to spray some lube on that. There. All done. So this is what you want. You want to be able to just finger spin these with just the utmost of ease. The motor drive should spin and all the gears should spin nice and easy. Now that once we're done with lubricating and cleaning all that, what you're going to want to do is hold the electrical plug here. And I apologize for my camera skills. I can't quite see where that thing is pointing. So anyways, hold that plug there so that the solenoids don't fall out on you when you go vertical. So hold it vertical so that your shafts don't fall out, and slowly mate this thing together. Boom, done. Now we put our screws back in here. And this should work worlds better. So when you heard me testing it on the first initial part of the video, you heard all that clicking and clacking. That's really this thing sitting there moving around. It's quite loud. You know, those are some sizable solenoids. So when you energize them, they're going to make some noise. I wasn't hearing that before. It was quite quiet. So I'm confident that we solved this little gearbox's issues once and for all, at least for another 60 years. Okay, so that's the gearbox. What next? We did the switches, we did the motor, the cables. That's a fun one. All right, let's do the cables. Okay, so the cables. Some of these were stiff, some of them not so much. Most of them actually were not very stiff at all. So I tried to clean them up to see if they would get any easier. But if you can finger spin it, I think that's probably okay. You know, it's not going to feel super easy. It's a flexible cable going through some plastic sleeving. But I'll show you what I did. It may help somebody if theirs is really frozen up. So I've got a like a vacuum port plug, like a generic vacuum port rubber plug. I drilled a hole in the top of it, and I got a hose clamp on there. So I hose clamped it, and you see that flange right there. I'll hose clamp it right there. So that it's nice and tight. Right? Not so that it's crushing it, but more so that it's like airtight, right? Then I would take some brake cleaner and fill this up, and it allows me to spray it into the end of this cable, and then it just kind of drips out of the bottom, right? So what I was hoping to do was loosen up any old grease that was in there, but I don't think these were greased. I think it's just like a plastic sleeve for the cable to roll around in. I would cut one up if I had a trash one just to see what it looks like on the inside, but I'm not trashing these. And then once I was done with that, I used a variety of different methods to try to get the most lubrication through here. I used WD-40, and I know it's not really a lubricant, but you know, it flows well. and I don't really have anything else that would flow well. I did try putting some white lithium in here, and I would spray this whole hole up, take my air gun, and pump it in here, and it would actually blow the white lithium through the line. And that seemed to get some of the white lithium through as well. So that's the way I cleaned mine. I don't know if they really need to be serviced if they're moving. Because even after doing all that, they didn't really seem to get much easier, but as you can tell, these really aren't bad off to begin with. So I still have the other 3 cables to go through. But let's go look at the actual seat servos, actuators, something. Let's go look at those and see if we can get one of those rebuilt. All right. So I've got one of my seat rails. As you can see, I haven't touched this at all. Oh, this is the worst one too. So let's see if we can get this thing apart and look at those actuators. This is a 3/4 inch. Okay. So the first one is going to be this one right here that I'm going to worry about. And that's the move forward and backwards. Okay, so I lifted it straight out of here. Okay, so I was wondering if it was going to come apart on me or not. So it did not. That thing is all kinds of greasy in there. I'm wondering, so there's a flathead right here, which looks like a manual adjustment. I don't know what that is actually. So that's not moving. So I've got my square drive here. Okay. That's moving just fine. It's stiff though. Gosh, I really don't want to have to try to. So they've got these 2 points here where they've squished the metal. Essentially, they deformed the aluminum here, or casting, in order to press the 2 pieces together. And that's how it's been moving. But this has been dead for so long. I wonder if I can just squeeze some more grease in there. Hang on, I'll be right back. All right, I'm back with more tools. So, what I was looking at, and I'm hoping that the other ones have it too, there is a small hole right here, and I'm going to pump grease into it. But you'll have to bear with me for a second because I've got to change my grease gun fitting. Okay, I'm back. I'm going to squirt some grease in there. I'm going to pump this until I know it's coming out. Okay. We have the grease. Now, here's the thing. I want to get new grease into this, but I don't want to fill it because I don't want that grease coming out all over my carpet. Because on a hot summer day, that stuff will flow right on out. All right, so I put, 2 or 3 squirts in there. Now, I'm going to go back to that hack I had in the other video where you use a square drive bit. put it in there. Getting a lot easier. So there's also this bushing at the top here, but that grease isn't going to hit that, nor is it really going to hit that one in the bottom. I wonder if we can just penetrate it with some WD or something. Oh wow, that woke it right up. That's gorgeous. Okay. So that's the ticket, is to get those bushings freed up. And that's kind of what I was, oh man. Let that soak into there. Okay. Well, I'm calling that a victory for this one. Am I going to worry about getting this thing super clean? No, it's underneath my seat. As long as it works, I'm not really going to care but so much. I'm not building a show car. I'm building a daily driver. Okay. That's that one. Now, let's see if we can get one of these guys off and get this rail out of my way. So, looks like I'm going to do this one because this one's still covered up by the rail. 5/16. Okay, so we can see that as that thing spins, it pushes this up and down. It's going to try to see, oh, I can. You unscrew it a little bit and push, you can get the whole thing out. Look at that grease. It is hard as anything. Oh, it's a bearing there. Okay, we're going to have to be careful about that. I don't want balls going all over the place. Okay, you stay. Yeah, this one's quite stiff. But it's all metal. That's, you gotta hand it to these guys. They built a solid car. I mean, this thing is all metal. Wow. Now there's still some soft grease in there, but most of it is hard. Like that. That bearing probably wasn't even turning. So we got a little rock hard O-ring at the top. Oi. Yeah. There we go. There's another bearing up there. Or at least it looks like one. Maybe it's just a bushing. Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. Is there anything else to take off of this? No. We're going to leave that there. Okay, so now we're already back to this. Take this screwdriver. I'm going to pry up gently. And that's going to take out the worm gear. And its 2 bushings. Now, I'm trying to tell if there's a bearing up there or not. I don't really want to go pounding on this housing. I think it's just a bushing and a top seal surface for where that O-ring would seat into it. Because you got to think, once the seat is there, all the weight is pushing down. So that bottom bearing was probably essential, but this top one, I think it's just a bushing. Because it's not really spinning at that point. It's just going up and down. So let's get some pliers and break this off of here so we can get it out and get it cleaned up. Okay, so 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. I should switch hands. I don't know if it's gonna let me let it come off. If I can find a legit way of holding this thing. You know what? I'm putting it in the vise. I know you can't see it. Boy, oh boy, that's stuck. Oh, I see why. It's not actually screwed on. I thought it was screwed on there. So this just pops off. See, I thought it was actually threaded all the way through here because it was so gunked up. It looked like it was one solid piece, but then when I got it over there on the vise, things started wiggling. So that just pops straight off. And with that, it comes out. Now, you could probably pop that off earlier, and then this whole gear and everything would come out with it. And then, you know, this would still be in the middle of this. That's upside down. This would still be in the middle of that. So, there's all that. Let me get this out of the way. Now we're going to get it cleaned up and see how much easier she moves after that. So, pot cleaner, toothbrush, rag, and some spray. So let's think about this. What should we put together first? I think let's put this shaft in there. That way I can maybe use a screwdriver and scrape the grease up and down, or a Q-tip. They're not just for cleaning your ears, folks. I'm sorry, I'm probably off camera. Okay, so when looking at this gear, the small side is what faces up, right? Towards the upper part of the seat, not the floorboard. So that's the way I'm putting this in here. I'm probably gonna end up squeezing out a ton of grease, yep. But I'm gonna scrape it off and then smush it through there again so that I know everything is coated. Yeah. Gorgeous, darling, just gorgeous. All right. Wipe off the excess. I am not convinced that this was an O-ring. It is just way, way, way too hard. So it's probably like a piece of Bakelite or something. Couldn't quite tell, but it's acting as a bushing here, right? So we're gonna go ahead and grease this whole spot. And put this on here. So just a quick touch-up video on these front and rear actuators for the lifting of the front seat. When I was taking apart that first one, it was the one on the rear of the seat. So we were talking about this piece right here. I wasn't sure if it was some sort of O-ring or a bushing, but it's extremely hard. It is a bushing. However, when I took the front one apart, I noticed that it has a bearing in the top of it. So when you're taking apart and putting these things back together, try to make sure that you keep the front one in its front spot. I'm not sure why they're different. There's no markings on the housing that show that they're different. The only difference that I was able to visibly see from the outside is that the stud here, the central little stud, looks to be more of a coppery brass alloy than this one looks to be more of a steel. And so you can kind of see the color difference. That's the only visual difference that I could see on the outside of it. So the only reason I can think is that maybe the seat can go back far enough to where this actuator, instead of seeing down force, now sees up force from the position of the seat. So anyways, be careful of the position of these two. Now, before I put the worm gear back in, I'm going to grease down in here as well. And I'm not afraid of it. I'm putting a lot in here. Maybe not that much. Okay, so that's greased. You know what? Make sure that when you get down in that hole, you go ahead and get up in this bushing too. I'm still not sure if that's a bushing or a bearing. I think it's just a pressed in bushing. All right, worm gear. On the end is the little pink one. Sliding down the shaft with the metal washer towards the worm gear. Right like that. And put a little bit more grease on here. And then this slides on back in here. Oops, upside down. Flat sides up. Okay. Now this is going to slide on down in there. So what I want to do is, you guessed it, we're going to grease it up. Okay. So it looks like that worm gear drives on the very bottom of that gear. So you may not need to grease all the way to the top of that gear like I just did. Put the bearing back on. Grease that. Say hello, honey.
Hello, honey.
It's bedtime for the kids. I gotta go tuck them in. And then the cap. Did I do that wrong? I think I did that wrong. This. Okay, so this bearing is two-sided. Yeah. So the balls, I'm trying to figure out how to describe this. You've got a more rounded side on the outside circle, and then you've got a hard round. The more squared round goes to the bottom. And then the round goes to the top so that it can meet this bearing retainer plate. There it goes. Push in nice and square, and that's it. This just goes back on top when we reassemble it into the rail. So let's see how much easier that turns. Yeah, that's butter smooth. So very good. Yep. Okay. So just repeat that 4 times. Do the other rail or the other actuator twice, and you're gonna have a fully rebuilt system. Hopefully that helps somebody out. Let me know in the comments. Take it easy.